Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today as co-host is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. Daniel, we have a very special guest today, Kelley Vlahos, and she's somebody who's been very interested in writing about the important issues like national defense, wasteful spending, even health matters. So I find her fascinating, and she does a lot of freelance writing, and she's with us today. Kelley, welcome to our program.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, good. We were glad to have you here. The thing that caught our attention this past week was the article that you had published in the American Conservative magazine. That's the How Wartime Washington Lives in Luxury. I would have never guessed. Oh, this is such a shock to me that this is happening. So what are you revealing to us? So tell us a little bit about that article.
Sure. Well, I mean, on one hand, you might think, okay, this is an old story. After 9/11, I mean, billions of dollars of federal taxpayer money had gone into the Washington, D.C. region to fight the global war on terror, whether it be the Homeland Security state at home or the wars overseas, cybersecurity, and everything attached to that. So we've been seeing this sort of boon in the Washington, D.C. area for now almost 15 years. But what's interesting about the current state of the Beltway land is that despite a terrible recession in 2008, a financial collapse, the burst of the real estate market, this area has not only survived it, but it has thrived in it. And it is because this contracting boon, these federal procurement dollars that are not only going into D.C. proper, but into Virginia and Maryland contracting companies, has continued unabated despite the Chicken Littles, over sequestration and budget tightening. There has been just an enormous amount of money in this area, and it's not only related to war, but it's also related to politics, the politics of war, and those politics have been greased, so to speak, by Citizens United and campaign finance laws that have allowed limitless sums of money to go into campaigns, into super PACs, which have afforded, this sort of slushing of money to ensure that the candidacies and incumbencies of members of Congress here and senators. So you've had quite an ecosystem created from war that continues to today. And that's basically what was writing about in my piece.
Yes, and I think the important point I got from your article is we talk a lot about the military-industrial complex, but I think we sort of have it fixed in our mind that it's several big companies that build military weapons, and not realizing how pervasive this is. And I think that's what your article does. It shows that this is big business for sure, and a big political business. And Daniel, I believe, has a question for you here.
Well, thanks for joining us, Kelley. I think I first came across your writing, or I first came to notice when you did that excellent article on the burn pits in Iraq a number of years ago. And I just thought it was terrific reporting, of which there's not a lot these days. Everyone has an opinion. Nobody wants to pound the pavement and get the answers. So if you remember, we had you up to Dr. Paul's office for one of his famous Thursday lunches where you got to talk to a bunch of members. And it really was memorable. So we have fond memories of that. When I saw this article, of course, I always follow your writing, but also, I've known Mike Lofgren for a number of years. He's, matter of fact, one of the first people I met when I came to D.C., and Mike's a terrific guy with a terrific new book about the deep state. So I thought this is going to be a great article. And maybe I like it because this is something we've concentrated on, which is the idea of the American people getting ripped off at the expense of the Washington elites. And I remember right after 9/11, all of these magazines started popping up. Homeland Security jobs and seminars, and it was such a boon. People, all of a sudden became experts, huge jobs. But one of the things that related to that was pointed out in the article, and both you and Mike pointed it out, is that, the government employees, that's one thing. A lot of people employed by the government in D.C., they get great salaries, but really good job security as well. But that's kind of peanuts compared to what Mike calls the deep state. And those are, as you pointed out in your article, K Street, the lawyers, political consultants, the Beltway fixers, the war on terrorism profiteers. And this is where the McMansions are born. Isn't that right, Kelley?
Right, exactly. And I think, and I was going to bring up Mike too, because he is sort of the founder of our feast here. He wrote the book Deep State. I've had some extensive conversations with him, and he had written a few excerpts about Beltway land, and I was just absolutely fascinated because these are my surroundings, and he was actually pulling no punches and describing, what it's like around here. And what he zeroes in on, yes, is that this ecosystem. It's not only the government workers who do have caps on their salaries, but it are all the people who are feeding off this trough. And it's not just the CEOs. It's not just the executives at these defense contracting companies, but it is the lawyers who work for them. It's the lobbyists who fan out on the Hill to make sure that their weapon systems are funded every year. It's the consultants. It's the people who do the war gamings. It's the think tanks that are getting the money to produce the reports that justify action, that justify new systems, that justify more funding. And it goes on and on and on. And then, you have people in technology. Cybersecurity is huge here now. So you have entire neighborhoods springing up. Like I brought up Merrifield, which is a part of Fairfax County out here. This was a enormous strip mall type existence up until a few years from now. Now it's this, it's this village development where you have these high-end restaurants and
very
condos.
fancy. I was there. It's very fancy.
Yeah, and the rents are over, $2,000 for a one bedroom. And who are living in these condos? But these kids who are being hired at these tech firms to do cybersecurity and intelligence. And so it's created an entire community of people who are all working together to maintain this status quo and in what he calls the imperial city. So it isn't just about the government here. We're talking about way beyond. And, he goes way off into Loudoun County, where we're talking about moguls. We're talking about people who are building not just McMansions, but actual mansions out in, formerly wooded, country. Virginia hunt country is now turned into this sort of playland for Washington's, the power elite.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's gross distortion in the distribution of income, which is not a natural conclusion from a free market. So this is artificial. There's not a shortage of money. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of spending by government, and yet we have all these distortions and a lot of anger and a populist movement that we haven't had in a decade. But I believe near where you live, I think it's Loudoun County is the richest county, is that correct, in the whole country? And the other number that I was fascinated with was how much money went into Virginia by this maldistribution. $295 billion has gone into this city, and then the poor aren't benefiting, even not too far. Some parts of Virginia, there's still poor people, and certainly in this country. And this is such a predictable result when government gets so involved. But aren't these the numbers to me are just astounding that have gravitated into Washington, in the Washington area in Northern Virginia?
Oh, absolutely. One article that I had read on this very subject had talked about the enormous growth in the town of Great Falls, which is right outside the Beltway, and it formerly a wooded a hamlet, bedroom community of Washington with scattered modest homes. And now it is, if you Google real estate Great Falls, Virginia, you will find nothing under $1.2 million there for home prices. And the article went into not only the real estate, but the lifestyle of the people that live there. They're all high-powered lawyers. who have this sort of, they're living this sort of dream where they're driving around these expensive cars and networking and talking, they're all foodies, and it's really sort of despicable when you're thinking about the income equality in this area, because while you have the highest incomes and wealth in the country, the counties here are the wealthiest in the country, you also have the biggest income inequality gap, because you have to consider all of the people who grew up here that are not transplants, didn't come here to work, minorities in the Washington, D.C. proper, whose wages have either stagnated or gone down since the recession, and all of the white-collar workers whose jobs didn't survive the recession, because there are plenty of professions that, it was like Darwinism here, and that, these people have gone, 5-10 years without work. You consider that their wages and their income has gone down. So you see this stark relief in the income inequality here that you might not see in other places. And so when you see these real estate prices and the luxury lifestyle in places like Great Falls or Loudoun County and McLean, Virginia, or Potomac, Maryland, they have the wives of the Potomac is one of the housewives stories here, reality TV. And you look at that, and then you look at, some of what's been going on in D.C., where you have real existing poverty, and a crime rate that's rising, and you think, wow, this is the capital. This is the capital of the United States.
Right.
Kelley, I'd like to think that we would miraculously win the moral argument against war, or even the practical argument against war that doesn't make us any safer. But I fear, unfortunately, even though I'll accept it, that the argument, we may win it in a way that is convincing the American people that they are being ripped off. And, Mike writes about this too, about how rich and greedy Washington is so disdainful of what they call flyover country, i.e. the rest of us who pay the bill for their lavish lifestyle. And as much as I don't like the idea of class warfare, this really, I don't think, qualifies as class warfare, because the people in Washington are lying to the rest of the country about the real nature of the threat of terrorism and Russia and foreign countries. They're lying because it pads their bank accounts. And I think that's probably, the way that we might convince more people you're being ripped off. But Mike also talks about, and you write about this, that it's not just about the money, it's also about the ideology, and I think we should probably deal a little bit with that as well.
Yeah, and this is where I think Mike really, he kind of blows things out of the water here, because he talks about Mark Leibovich's book, Our Town, which was a powerful sort of examination of the Washington elite that came out a couple of years ago, and it talked about this sort of this pedestal that the Washington power brokers live on, and how they can't see so far down to the rest of us because they're too busy at their cocktail parties and networking in the green rooms and making their deals and being in front of a camera, and we know all about that, and it makes us sick, most of us, who live outside the bubble. But what Mike talks about is what the ideology behind that, and what he talks about is this deep state in which you have everybody working to justify the status quo, to sustain the level of comfort that they live in, to sustain the level of incomes that are coming, either directly or indirectly from the government. So you have people who might be working for a defense contractor who are justifying their job when they wake up every day, which is basically more money for more war. You have people on the Hill that are justifying these budgets that will put the money into the hands of these defense contractors. You have the lobbyists who are out there, promoting it. You have the think tankers who are also promoting it. You have, and then you have the political campaigns which, you know, basically these members of Congress, they need to stay here. This is their new goal. This isn't, it's not about, you know, so much as, you know, protecting the interests of their districts, but keeping themselves in this style that they've come accustomed to in Washington. So they're working. So it is a pro-establishment, it's a pro-government, pro-state, pro-empire ideology, all working together in sort of in a machine, and that's behind this power elite, this deep state, and it affects economic policy, it affects national security policy and domestic policy. And what he's saying is that everyone outside of this bubble can really is not empowered to do anything about it, because the rules are being written here in Washington. They're dictating what's going on outside of Washington, and the people dictating those rules are, I mean, the grain of their existence is behind keeping everything in place. And I think that's a really powerful argument that Mike Lofgren is making.
Okay, Kelley, I want to thank you very much. Our time has run out, but we deeply appreciate you coming on. And I hope our listeners now will follow more of what you do and what you write, because it's fascinating. You're a great reporter and a great writer. But thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
Good. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in today, and remind you that stories like this are so important to be kept up with current events. This, to me, was particularly interesting because there's a lot of ramification here. We're talking about the military-industrial complex and how massive it is and why the spending is bad, and what do we do about it? Some people think that all we have to do is control the political spending, another rule on political spending. And I've never had much confidence in that, because I sort of don't like regulating lobbyists. I think we need to regulate government. I think as long as government is there and they're massive and they have all these special interests, there's always going to be people who are going to try to take advantage of it. You know, the truth is, though, that if you had more people in Congress who were more principled, believe me, the lobbyists wouldn't bother them. It happened, and Daniel, I think, can verify this. We didn't have lobbyists coming to our office. They knew where I stood, and they didn't bother. So I think there is things that we could do right now, but ultimately, you're always going to have this problem as the bigger the government. And the government is big and they spend too much, because this also involves inflation. They print the money, where does the money go? It goes to the rich, and they build up massive inflationary problems, like very expensive houses and very expensive yachts and airplanes and all these sorts of things at the expense of the middle class. And this is a characteristic of Austrian economics. They teach that the middle class eventually gets wiped out. But everybody's talking today in the presidential campaign about how tragic it is for the middle class, but they don't talk about monetary policy and the Federal Reserve and the wiping out of the middle class and the destruction of money and why spending is bad. They all want to spend more. Can you believe it? They all want to rebuild the military. I mean, what are they talking about? How can they need to rebuild the military when it's bigger than everybody else put together? But nevertheless, I think stories like this help point out how serious this problem is, when you can see, in particular, all the money flowing into Northern Virginia that it has, the richest counties in the country, $295 billion into Virginia for special interests to support the military-industrial complex. So it's a great story and something that we will keep up with. And I want to thank everybody today for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.